In this problem, we're asked to investigate the tangent function and the cotangent function and give angles that are not in the domain from the interval from 0 to 360 degrees. So first let me start with the tangent function. The tangent function can be written as, or defined as, the sine of x over the cosine of x. So if I'm looking for values for which the tangent function is undefined, I know that that would be where the denominator is 0. In mathematics, if you divide by 0, that gives you an undefined function value. So what I really need to know is where cosine x is equal to 0. So since in this class, you have to memorize the graph of sine and cosine, so you should know y equals cosine x, this guy right here. The graph starts up here at 1 and does the following. So if I'm to find x values for which the cosine of x is equal to 0, that's rather simple. A function's values are 0 on any point on the x-axis. Here's a point on the x-axis, and here's a point on the x-axis. So in other words, if somebody were to plug 90 degrees into the cosine function, the output would be 0. And likewise, if someone were to plug 270 degrees into the cosine function, the output would be 0. So just labeling these 2 points on the x-axis shows that 90 and 270 are the x values that make cosine 0. So these would be the 2 values for which the denominator would be 0 in the tangent function, and then the tangent function would not be defined because you cannot divide by 0. So the answer to my first question would be 90 degrees and 270, and of course that would look a little bit different if they asked me to give it in radians, but they asked it in degrees. The cotangent function is almost exactly the same, except for the fact that the cotangent can be expressed or defined as the cosine function over the sine. So since the cotangent function can be written this way, and this time sine is in the denominator, finding where the cotangent is undefined is like finding where you'd be dividing by 0, and you would be dividing by 0 when the sine x comes out to be 0. So what x values make it so that the output of the sine is 0? So like we did over here, we're going to do the same thing with the sine function and say where would it output 0? Between 0 and 360 degrees, it would happen right here at 0, right here again at 180, and here at 360. So if you just plotted these points, 0, 0, 180, comma 0, and finally 360, comma 0. Here's 3 values for which the output of the sine function would be 0, and therefore the cotangent would be undefined for those 3 outputs. However, they wanted me to answer between 0 and 360, but notice they put a little parenthesis here indicating to not include the 360. So I'm not going to include the angle 360 in my answer. I'm going to just use the 0 degree answer and the 180 degree answer. And here's a graph of tangent and cotangent. You can do a little more analysis. I put them on top of one another on purpose because remember, wherever the cosine of x is 0, the tangent function would be undefined. So at x equals 90, cosine was 0. That makes the tangent function undefined at 90. And even though the graphing calculator doesn't plot them, there's a vertical asymptote here, meaning that if you plugged in 90 into the tangent function, there is no y value. It's undefined. And if you remember something from college algebra, x values near the x values that make the number 0 create these vertical asymptotes. In fact, there'd be another vertical asymptote at 270 here. So this is the graph of the tangent function, and it's undefined at 90 and at 270, exactly where the cosine was 0. And same thing with the cotangent function. You'll see an asymptote at 180, an asymptote at 360, and you see another vertical asymptote at 0. Because those are the x values that made sine 0, and making sine 0 makes the denominator 0 over here in the cotangent function, that's where the cotangent function has vertical asymptotes indicating that it is undefined.